You could have all the best camera gear in the world, from camera bodies to lenses, but if you're overlooking this one very essential part of getting cinematic video, you're gonna bang your head against the wall, wondering why your footage doesn't look as good as somebody else's. What's going on, guys? It's Kofi, and today we're gonna be talking about lighting, and more specifically, we're gonna try to solve 5 common lighting mistakes that a lot of beginners use and some seasoned veterans might end up forgetting. Now, mistake number 1 is thinking that any light is going to work in every situation, and the reason why that might not be true is because we're not paying attention to the quality of light. And I don't mean whether a light is going to be good or going to be bad, but you want to find different light sources that are going to be hard light or softer light. Generally speaking, the bigger the light source, the softer it's going to be, and the smaller it's going to be a little bit harsher. Now, small and harder light sources you might find might be those smaller aperture lights that you can get on Amazon. Now, with softer light, you're going to find softer light sources when you see things like lanterns and softboxes, or even 5-in-1 diffusion panels and big scrims that's used to spread out the harsher source of light that you're going to find on set. Now, you might be asking, well, shouldn't I just get soft light all over the place and that should solve my problem? But that might not necessarily be the most true thing in the world. Hard and soft light do have their use cases. Now, my rule of thumb, especially when I was starting out, is I used my harder light sources to light up spaces and my softer, more diffused light to light up faces. The reason why I want to do that is I want to make sure that I have a flattering look to the subjects that I'm working with. Unless it's for a very specific reason, I like to use soft light, because if you use something that's a little bit too harsh, you might get on somebody's nerves. Striking.
Ow! Oh my god! What the f? I don't want to help you with these videos anymore. You're stupid.
Oops. The next is going to be the positioning of your light. Now, conventional wisdom and a ton of videos on YouTube will tell you that you want to make sure things are on a 45-degree angle to give you something called Rembrandt lighting, to make sure that you have that little triangle on the opposite side of your face to give you the most depth in your images. And truthfully, that's exactly right. That is true. It will do that. What you want to do is you want to take a scan of the room and find something called ambient light. In a more practical sense, I'm sitting in my apartment right now. There's a window right behind me that's giving me light for this room. There's another window in the corner, and there is another big window right on the side of my face. Now, basically what I'm going to do is I want to put my key light on a 45-degree angle on the same side as where that window is. Now, the window is giving me so much ambient light that even if I turn off this light, actually, let me try that. If I turn off that light, you can still see there's a lot of light coming on the right side of my face, and this might be passable if it's a moody look you're going for, but if I want more wrap and exposure around my face, and I'm not going for a super moody look, instead of putting my light on the opposite side of the 45-degree angle, which might not look as natural, if I put it right where the window is, once I turn it back on, it looks a whole lot better, and there's a lot more exposure on this side of my face, and the lighting seems to just make sense. And just for reference, this is what it looks like when the light is on the opposite side of that 45-degree angle. Personally, not my favorite, doesn't look as good. So I'm gonna put this back on the window so we can talk about the rest of this video. Now, the third mistake that people make is actually not exposing for your highlights. Now, this is something that separates professional video to something that looks a little bit more amateur. However, I will accept that this is kind of a tricky thing to do in a lot of situations. Now, with exposing for your highlights, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're actually setting your settings to make sure that you're getting the most information in the brightest areas of your image before you start to set up your lighting. Now, a way that I could actually start to expose for my highlights is using things like false color on my monitor to find out exactly where it's going to clip in the information and bringing things back. So when I'm in post and I start to get that highlight information back, it's a lot easier than if I had blown out my highlights and I try to recover it later on. Only then will I start to set up my key light, set up exactly where I want to expose my skin tones at, and also put other fixtures in the room to give me the most amount of light. Number 4, and this one might be a little bit more obvious, but it happens quite often, and it's not setting the right white balance based on the light that you're going to be using. Basically, what you want to do is make sure your camera is actually set up to match the white balance of the lights you're going to be using. Now, in another video, I talked about cheating your white balance a little bit in certain situations, but when you're starting out and using external light, you want to just make sure that your camera is set up to be the accurate representation that's on the lighting itself. If you set your white balance up way too warm or you set it way too cool, it's going to be really tough, especially when a lot of us aren't shooting in RAW, to bring that stuff back to make sure that we're getting the right tones that we want out of our images. A lot of these lights nowadays have something called a CRI value, which means that it can represent colors pretty accurately and pretty well. And I'm only going to be screwing it up, and I'm not going to be getting the most out of that light if I'm not setting the proper white balance up in camera. And lastly, and this is more of a technical side of things, is not using the right stand stands for your lighting fixtures. Now I understand, we spent a lot of money on buying different lights for our videos, and the last thing we want to think about is spending $200 or $300 on getting a good stand to make sure that things are sturdy. And one thing I want to recommend for you guys, you want to put a lot of your bigger light fixtures, especially on something called a C-stand. They are a little bit cumbersome and they are a little bit heavy, but if you watch this video over here, we'll talk about more in depth for C-stands and how to get the most out of them and make sure your experience doesn't suck. That being said, that video will be out whenever you see the box over there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.